yourself.
Okay.
Couldn't hear you.
Start over. All right. Okay, we can do that. We're reconvening the Finance Committee that was suspended yesterday for the purpose of revisiting FT 7-20 and SA 35-20 with new information that was provided to us probably overnight by the finance director. So we were just beginning to look at FT7, which now has annotation next to each of the line items and an explanation in the department explanation box. And we were just getting all organized so we could look at those annotations.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Jody a question about police overtime?
Please.
Are these overtime and all of the, not just police, but and right now my top is cut off of my form, but what is the date? Stop. Thank you, Jillian. Because we know there's going to be additional overtime charges for this month.
All right. So I will tell you that this is as a result of what we project through the end of the year.
Okay.
So within that estimate is additional overtime that we expect them to incur. I'm hoping that at the end they won't need what we have projected, but we tend to be very generous because we don't want to end up at the end of the year and not have enough. Most of this was caused by the fact that we did not put any money in their budget for shift differential. Some of that is charged to salaries and it didn't get added to salaries. And that was a misunderstanding by how that's accounted for. I thought that was all included in their overtime budget, but it's not. So we had forgotten that. That was about 200,000. And they probably they've had some extra turnover, so they would have had enough, except for their overtime was running over. So that added to the.
Okay, well, we know that because of all of the rallies almost every day, there's going to be more overtime. So that's why I was asking whether this was accurate or projected, and you answered that. Thank you.
It's projected, but I'm not sure when we were projecting this that we knew all these rallies were going to take place. So I'm not sure if they have revised, but when I took a look at this, I thought this was a very conservative number. So I'm hoping to carry them through the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can tell you the chief is very concerned about the budget, but you know, with these rallies and during this day and time, we need to do what we need to do. So he'll manage the best he can to this budget, but there may be additional costs.
And I'll remind everyone that if the overtime relates to COVID-19 activities or recovery from COVID-19 activities, that can be covered by the other funding. For instance, if they're patrolling some of the recovery zone efforts.
Right. And districts.
Yeah, zones and districts and zones.
Well, right now there's only zones, but there should be districts. And David, I'm working on a revision of the executive order to show you what I mean by adding districts. I've discussed that with Franyo and Cardi Templeton, but that's for another time. So any other questions? I want to thank Jody and the finance department. This is exactly what I was looking for, and I think will be very helpful for the council at our meeting on Monday which hopefully we can move through all of these things quickly because we have a lot of budget discussion to do. So are there any other questions or observations anyone wants to make on FT 7-20? If not, I would ask the Office of Law or Takia, where are we? Did we approve this or not? And if not, do we need a motion to approve FT 7-20?
No, you approved FT 7-20 yesterday.
All right, so
it was 2 to 1.
Yeah, 2-1.
All right, do we need a motion to reconsider?
What are you?
I don't think so, unless anybody's going to change their vote.
Right.
All right, so committee, are we able to dispense with FT 7-20 from our agenda?
I think so.
All right, thank you.
Takes two of us.
Yeah, all right. So now we're ready to move on to SA 35-20. And the new information that I have is a detailed description of the $2 million, which is the county operating grant expenses. The document that I have, which I thought was the one that we got from you, Jody, shows the same revenue and expenditure categories as we had yesterday. And
if you look at, it shouldn't be. The one that's connected to the email was a revised one. And if you look at that top section where we talk about the revenue and expenses, and you look at the expense categories, you will see that I've added a description of what the money will be used for. For instance,
I don't have that.
It was on the same email that the other one.
I know, and I thought I was opening that.
All right. We can, if Julian can put it up on the screen.
Is it on the bottom of the expense document, of the expense chart?
So that expense chart is a backup to that $2 million. And that is a supporting schedule to the SA 3520 form, which is the one I think that Alderman Arnett's looking for. There is the top form that shows the SA request that we showed you yesterday. And then we provide that schedule with the 2 million as backup for one of those numbers.
Right, that's the backup for the
document that starts with hazard pay on the left, rapid response contamination units under that.
That is a supporting schedule to the $2 million that we saw on the SA form yesterday. And I had provided in that email, there was a third document that should be the SA 3520 form.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, great.
That's what I don't have.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
Okay.
That's what I got.
So
ambulance, okay.
So the revenue section looks very similar. I don't know if I did any tweaks there with the wording. If you scroll down, Julian, to the expenses section. Yeah, so here we have the expenses, and you wanted me to add a description on the items as to what department was spending and what they were spending it for. And so this is what I did here. For the fire department money, I put ambulance transport. For planning and zoning, these are the CDBG numbers. I'm not sure exactly how they're applying those, so I put community services, and I don't know if Lynn knows any more detail on what they're actually going to spend it on. And then on the police department, we checked, this is money they got from their burn justice grant. It came in as additional burn justice money, and they are going to use it for 2 variable messaging signs for COVID-related messages. And then we look, and all I added for transportation was to clarify that it's for transit operations, because it's really just general money that can be applied to any operational expense.
And that's the one that doesn't have a specific year ending date? That's the one that could be carried over?
Yes, and I can't provide detail because what they're going to do is at the end of every quarter or all the reporting periods, they look at, I think Kwaku told me at the end of the year, they're going to look at, here's everything we spent. and they're going to subtract all their other revenue sources, including their regular grant monies, and any difference of expenditures that are over the revenue, they're going to draw down from this money.
Okay.
So
And then
there's no detail schedule behind it. It's just whatever they need to cover the net expenses from their transit operations.
And so the detail for the $2 million, which is the 2020 allocation of the money coming from the county,
Correct.
has these items, but does not have the social worker, because that's going to be in the $2.25 million.
Correct. That would be a 2021 item. We were trying to list anything that we might have to do this year. We might have to spend or order this year. So that's the support for, you have the support for the 2 million, and the rest of it is next year, which will come back in July for the rest of those appropriations.
Right. But for the 2021 budget deliberations on Monday, should we not have the 2021?
I would, here's why I would rather wait, because we're going to have unused monies from some of these other pots and maybe some unused from the 2 million, and we'll have to reappropriate that as well. So I'd rather do it all at once. And so we're going to have it ready at the very beginning of July for you.
But so we will know that there is going to be some potential impact on the 2021 budget that will be at least $2.25 million, but might be larger because of some carryover of this $2 million.
Correct. And this is all going to be accounted for in a grant fund, so it won't be a part of the general fund. So it's not, it won't affect that. And I don't know if you would rather have the amendment for Monday or not in the grant fund. It'll just make more amendments to be processed, and we can do that after the fact.
What's the sense of the committee on this?
I mean, the only thing that I could do for certain is to put the other $2.2 million in a grant fund for the COVID-19. The rest of it, I don't even know an amount to give you. So
I think that I would be comfortable with that, but I'm not sure. I mean, the grants right now are $6.5 million. That would make it $9 million.
Yep.
Looking pretty plush. Well,
it's only, hopefully this COVID thing is over, and you know, we won't have to struggle with spending money on it into the next year.
I like that glass half full attitude on your part.
Yep. I mean, I don't expect to have 8 million every year.
Right.
Where's the 8 million? I see 6 million.
We, in the budget now for grants in the fiscal 21 budget, we have $6.5 million.
Okay.
This $2.25 million plus whatever carryover we have from this $2 million would go into those grant tables. I think they're in the early 20s in our budget binder. So it would just show more money in grants. It won't show an allocation of those grant dollars to any particular item, but we need to know when we're deliberating on the 2021 budget that those monies are there. And Jody, if I'm saying it wrong, or David, that those monies are there for backup, for things that I assume can be applied in the general fund where they're appropriate.
We wouldn't, any monies use, any spend expenses that we generate that will use this COVID money, the 2.2 million or anything left over, those would be expenses out of the grant fund, not the general fund. If it were something that was originally spent in the general fund, but it's COVID related, we would transfer it out of general fund as an expense and move it to the grant fund as an expense.
But so, the grant monies, the $6.5 million now, are reassigned to various parts of the budget now, are they not?
They're in their own separate fund. They're not in the general fund. They're not accounted for at all in the general fund.
I'm still not clear, however. So what is being accounted for as grant funding on this SA 35?
All of it.
So that's the 2 million for COVID plus the 4 million for transit.
Correct. And those other three pieces, smaller pieces.
Okay.
Which are about 280,000.
Okay.
So it's about $6.5 million. Another
$6.5 million. Okay.
4 million will be in the transportation fund. That grant fund and the operating fund are combined and reported together. But the grant fund is accounted for separately from the general fund. And Chair Alderman Arnett, you may be thinking a couple years ago before we split out the grants. They used to be spent through the general fund, but not budgeted. So,
but those grants are going to various places in the general fund to be used.
No. If you see our accounting, we've got them separated. We put the grant money in a separate place and we spend it out of a separate place called the grant fund. If you look at your CAFRs for 19, you will see a grant fund in the special revenue category, and it's got federal, state, county grants combined in there.
So I'm looking at the grant tables, page 20.
And if you're looking now at your ordinance, your budget ordinance, the general fund is the $80 million number in Schedule A, in Appendix A. The grant money is that Appendix B. Am I remembering that right? B or C?
So I'm looking at page 31 of the budget binder under grant fund summary.
Correct.
And I'm seeing revenues and
Correct.
Expenditures. So expenditures are shown by department.
Yes, they are by department, but they're not in, this is not in the general fund. If I can call your attention to, let's go back up to one of the summary pages. Let's go back up to, page 18 in your budget book.
Very first one.
All right. Let me know when you're there.
I'm struggling. 18. All right.
All right. So if you look down that list of funds, you have the general fund, and then you have other funds. And the third item in other funds is grants.
Correct.
All of those things you just pointed out, they're divided by department because we track them within the department that's spending it. But they're not reported through the general fund. They're reported through the grant fund by department.
So if we go to police, we will see grant monies there in police, right? In their expenditure table? Yeah.
So you have police expenditures. Those aren't police general fund expenditures. Those are police grant expenditures.
So I got the table.
So $1,729,353. No, wrong page.
Tell me what page you're on.
I was on 31. I need to be on.
You need to be on page 100.
So page 31 is revenues, and yes, like police department has budgeted revenues.
Okay.
1,729,359. Yes.
Okay.
And but that doesn't have anything to do with the general fund. It's reported and budgeted in
All grant funds.
So I'm looking at the first page of the line item budget stuff, which says ties to page 99 in the book. And I'm trying to find where the police expenditures of grant funds shows up.
Not on 99. So when you're looking at your departmental divisions back here, we don't have a table with their grant monies here.
So where it shows total expenditures proposed for law enforcement of $21,853,200.
That's just general fund.
So then there's additional expenditures of grants by police, which would make their actual expenditures larger than the $22 million.
Well, yes. Most departments that deliver services have grant monies in the grant fund. The police, it's the extra one point, I don't know if it's 1.7 in the expenditure side or not, but it's around $1.7 million on the expenditure side, but extra grant money.
Okay. I think that by doing it this way, we're understating the spending by department because we're not accounting for where does the bulk of that $6.5 million of grant money get spent?
What?
Transportation?
Which $6.5 million are you talking about?
The $6.5 million of grants that are back on page 31 or whatever it is.
Okay, so the pages 31 do not include transportation grants.
All right.
If you look back in the transportation fund, let me take you back to page 125 in your book where we start talking about the Department of Transportation.
Well, I'm trying to, transportation is only one. I'm looking at grants, revenues. Right now I'm back to page 33, which is the expenditures, which doesn't add up to 6.5.
Okay. This is the expenditure. Are you looking at the total?
Well, I'm trying to find where the $6.5 million of grant revenues or 6.3, whatever it is, are actually spent. So under police, I can I need to ask you where you're getting that $6.5 million number. From the revenue. We're getting $6.5 million worth of grants in, right? Or 6.3, whatever the number is.
Hold on. Okay, state grants. Federal. Okay, so it's divided by federal. All right. So let me these schedules that you have here starting on page 30. You start on page 30. That's federal grant revenue.
Right.
31 is state grant revenue.
Right.
32 is county grant revenue and any other grant revenues, although we don't have any of those now.
And then back on page 18.
And so if you add those categories together,
they will equal a number on page 18.
Yeah, so that's on this, there's a summary form. There's one of the summary forms has the grant schedule. The grant expenditure is broken out by pieces in total. Let me see if I can find that one for you.
So page 18 shows total grants of $6.3 million. So that's
Correct.
Some of these pages,
Correct.
29, 30, 31,
Correct.
32. Then you go to expenditures and it shows how the grants are expended by department. So police has a total in fiscal 21 of $371,000. That would get added to the police expenditures shown back in the detailed pages of $2,853,000. So the actual total police spending is more than what's shown in the summary table for police by the amount of these additional grants, and the same for fire, same for Office of Emergency Management, same for Recs and Park.
Correct.
Planning and zoning, all of, so the details on 33, 34, and 35. All right. Sorry for that sideline committee for a tutorial.
Yes.
But
so if we had known all of this information and we had numbers, good numbers for 21 for these grants, they would have added to those schedules that you saw there.
Right.
But always during the year, we come to you with additional grant appropriation requests. And
Yes,
my thought was that for the 21 pieces, that we would come back to you at the beginning of the fiscal year and ask for the appropriation authority for the remainder of it.
Right. Okay. Committee, where are you all in this? I hope I Sorry for my digression, but I wanted to get all of this straight in my head.
Well, I'm a little bit lost in your digression, but look, I'm okay. I mean, I think I'm satisfied with the information we have.
Right. So
Jody, you can quote me on that.
Okay, I will.
We will.
Could I see this? Would you be able to scroll up a little bit?
Oh.
Sure. Where are you?
I can't see.
There you are.
But I can't see like the line.
Julian, can you put that back up?
Ross, in the meantime, I'm comfortable with the explanation and the level of detail we have.
Yes, am I.
Julian?
Yeah, me three.
So do we need a motion to?
There it is. It's coming back up if
Alderman Gay?
Yeah, we're going to give Dewan a second to get caught up.
Yeah.
Could you just scroll up really quickly? I just wanted to see if this was the correct one that I was.
So I'm not sure where you are, Dewan. What do you need more discussion on?
I thought this was the one that we ended on yesterday. I'm sorry. Is this not the same thing?
It is.
Oh, which
Well,
one?
Yeah.
we had the FT yesterday as well. He might be referring to the fund transfer.
I recall in this, David said that we had from the CARES funding that we had hazard pay. Is that still on the table, $600,000?
Yeah, so Julian, if you'll scroll down and we can see the $2 million number there for the county CARES revenue. That $2 million number, we sent out a schedule today that has the backup for that $2 million. And so if you hadn't got that, I don't know if it went to the council. I didn't send it to the whole council. I sent it to the finance committee. Let me see if I can.
I sent it to the entire council.
Okay, so you shouldn't have any. Go ahead.
My question was just,
hazard pay in that number.
Stop me if I'm getting in the way of something. But are we still considering giving both hazard pay and a pay increase to?
So that's for this is for FY20. We are appropriating this money for FY20, and in FY20, yes, we are planning on some hazard pay for some employees that have the contact with the public.
So do you have a breakdown of that generally? Because I guess my question is that will the individuals who are under that negotiation that you guys, I mean, they'll get hazard pay and a raise in 6 months?
Yes, but the hazard pay is for something totally different.
It is for something totally different, but there are other people who are working who will not be getting a raise in 6 months.
Right, correct. You are correct. And so, but the mayor's budget, as proposed, as you know, we have proposed delaying that increase until January, but it has not been yet accepted by unions. So we don't know if they're going to get it on July 1 or January 1.
Okay, I'll just keep a lookout for that then. At some point, I'm not sure if I'll look for that breakdown. I think I have it right here, actually. Would it be possible to break the numbers down even further, as into, okay, we're giving Parks and Rec of this $600,000, $150,000 for their employees. We're giving Public Works $250,000 for their employees. I just would like to get a better breakdown there.
Yeah, we can provide that to you. I'm not sure we're 100% nailed down on the list of names. We got a lot of them done, but we were going back to department heads and making sure we had who we needed to on that list. But yes, ultimately we would be able to give you a breakdown. And it does cross many departments like that. So you'll see chunks of the hazard pay in each department.
And really quickly, just my last two. What was the federal operating grant revenue at the top, that Department of Justice? What's that $55,000?
That came through our normal grant through they call it BJAG, Burn Justice. I'm not sure what the A and the G stand for, but that's a grant that we get every year from the federal government, and through this CARES Act funding, they just tacked on another $55,000. We have to use it for COVID-related purposes. And as you can see down lower in that grid on the expense side, the police department are planning on buying some variable message signs for COVID-related messaging.
Oh, okay. And what is planning and zoning CBD? Oh, okay, that's the grant. Okay, the second grant that we got through the House Human Development Committee. Okay. And so the second $2 million will then follow at some point, I'm assuming? They broke it up into...
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
They couldn't just cut us a flat check for $4 million?
They're advancing us $4,250,000.
And so when will we have like complete access to that to start the disbursement process?
So as soon as we can get this passed, we can spend, we'll have the appropriation authority for spending, and I'm hoping to have the cash soon.
Okay, go ahead, Ross.
If you're talking,
Ross, you're on mute.
I think we're at the point where we're getting ready for a motion to recommend approval of SA 3520 to the council. Sheila or Fred?
Are you ready? Yeah, I'll move, recommend approval of SA 3520.
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of recommending approval of SA 20 to the council signify by saying aye.
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 All right. And again, thank you, Jody and Katie and everybody else who worked on this in the finance department. Once again, it was exactly what I was looking to get, and it's very helpful. I believe the next item on our agenda is for me to go over information that I received from the police and fire pension, which I think is relevant in a more generic sense of the overall outlook for the economy. And both Jody and David were there, so if I miss something important or misstate something, please back me up on this. But Ian Jones, our manager, started off by telling us that the markets went down almost 34% between February 19th and March 23rd. Since then, they've recovered almost 33%, which is a little bit misleading because remember, that's 33% of a much lower market number. So we're still down a cumulative loss of 12.2%. But even in the last week, right when we were getting this report from him, the market had increased by 3.3%. So our total loss for the year is 7.8%, which is a nasty loss to be sure, but certainly not like what we were experiencing back in the latter part of February, early part of March. The discussion then turned to our investments in particular, because we have tried to diversify our portfolio, and so we have a major portion of our portfolio held in the form of equities, but then we have other forms of holding, including financials and some more esoteric kinds of things, some debt service kinds of things. But what we were focusing on is how we have performed over time in terms of having managed accounts versus index accounts, which we don't have any of, and also how we were performing on value stocks versus growth stocks. And the theory for value stocks, which are stocks that you buy that you think are underpriced, or stocks that are sort of the gold standard stocks that yield a dividend also, as well as have change in value. And repeatedly, the value stocks have not performed well for us. So we're in the process of mulling over, I think, over the next 6 months, the kinds of holdings we have and the whether we're going to be active investors or passive investors. Ian is pretty good. Ian Jones, and he pointed out to us on some of the things. If we look for the life of our holdings, the managed stocks have still outperformed the market. And so we are getting some bang for the buck from our portfolio managers. And that's a good thing. We want that. Over the life of the performance of our portfolio, we have yielded above our 7.5% rate of return that we have determined we need actuarially. But in recent years, that has been a much closer thing. And so we have been starting to look at more and more risky investments that'll give us a higher yield, but obviously carry with them more risk, which means the downside is bigger than the safer investments. So, but the overall picture is the market has recovered, in my view, astonishingly quickly. And every time we have news of a potential new vaccine or medical intervention for the virus, it seems like the market gets another jolt, and could well be that for next year, we've been focusing on fiscal 21, but for fiscal 22, the picture might not be nearly as bleak as you would suspect. Now, I think if we have another spike in cases, which we may well have, the market's going to react to that and it's going to go down. But the resiliency of the market, and I would look to you, Jody, in particular, but David also, if you have a perspective on this, the market is showing a great deal of resilience, and the market was going like gangbusters. I mean, it's very hard to hold it back. Now, the market is one measure of financial health. It is not a measure, it's a measure that masks the great bifurcation between the haves and the have-not. And so the people that we're worrying about in the pandemic are the people that are not the 1%ers or not the people that are doing well. They're the people that are living paycheck to paycheck. But at least for our investment in our police and fire pension plan, I think there's reason to be optimistic that we will weather this, and probably weather maybe even faster than we weathered the housing bubble crash back in 2009. I don't want to be overly optimistic, and I'm usually not, but it is amazing to me how much the market has bounced back. So that's, I will give you a more written report, and I'll give you, there's a very nice summary page that Ian Jones put together that shows this all pretty well and fairly succinctly. But I thought it would be interesting both in terms of how we're doing for our pension plan, but also what the market might be doing to the city in terms of next year and the year after that. If the market is in the indicator, I think recovery could be fairly quick. Not in the health sense. I think people who get the virus are still going to get the virus, but in terms of financial health, I don't think it's a doom and gloom picture. I wouldn't paint it as a doom and gloom picture. And why this is relevant is early on in the budget, the Finance Committee was talking about, do we need to take some big cuts in fiscal 21 in anticipation of a bad fiscal 22? And my feeling on that was, well, if you can tell me how bad 22 is going to be, then I'll tell you how much I think we should cut 21. But right now, I think we need to get continual updates, as has been promised by the city manager, and monitor this closely. I think things like people coming back to dine out, although if last night was any indication, there were certainly people dining out. But dining out affects parking, and parking affects transportation. Now, transportation looks like it got to get well card for the next several years. So really, from my perspective, and this is just my uneducated look, I'm not feeling terribly uncomfortable. I'm feeling that we have a conservative budget, both in terms of showing what we think our revenues are going to be, and conservative in a little bit of padding in the expenditures, because we always seem to have the department heads manage their budget better than we budgeted for. So my sense is I'm willing to wait to see what 21 pans out as we're in it, and then that'll give us a better thought about what 22 is going to look like. Sheila.
Did the experts that spoke to you guys mention anything about the jobs rate and how that would impact the market? Or jobless rate, actually, is what it should be.
Yeah, well, the jobless rate turns out, and I'll let others chime in here too, but it turns out that this is encouraging more technology, and that's not good for more employment. So, and it's also may not be good for commercial real estate, because I think managers are now finding that, just as we're doing now, committee members from at home, and also that a lot more things can be automated. And so until we find new markets to employ people, particularly people who don't have specialized degrees, college degrees, I don't think this looks good for them. And that is certainly going to be one of those anchors that is going to be pulling back the progress of the economy. But that's also something that is going to fall into the great political divide we have in this country between conservative philosophy and progressive philosophy. And I think a lot of that's going to depend upon who gets elected in November. If the Democrats get elected, I think there's going to be a lot more progressive programs to retrain and assist people who are unemployed. Certainly something I would espouse, but not necessarily something that the market would espouse. So, yeah, I mean, the market doing well and people doing well are really not the same thing. And we can't forget that. David, yes. Did I? Yeah,
it's a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit perverse, right? The stock market almost would prefer a slightly higher unemployment rate, because once the job market gets to be too tight, then it's hard for businesses to hire people. So I think in general, the stock market would rather that you have a little bit higher unemployment rate, because then you have, it's a supply and demand issue, right? And if you have a greater supply, that's beneficial for the businesses.
Yeah, it is perverse and certainly not progressive. And that's going to be the great debate and the big decision that we'll be making in November. One of the ironies for me is a lot of the people who are voting against the progressive agenda are the very ones that would be helped by it, it seems to me. But I'm only one vote, and I'll vote the way I'm going to vote, and they'll have to figure it out for themselves.
Ross, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Have you guys went over SA 3520 already?
Yes, we did. That was what we just took a vote on.
Oh, all right, never mind. I'm sorry, I was late to it. I did have. I'm not. Is this just the first round, or?
Yeah, this will be coming to the council on Monday. So all we're doing is recommending from the Finance Committee. We're recommending favorably.
I'm not seeing our request, though, that Sheila and you and I put together.
That we discussed that yesterday, and that is going to be in the fiscal 22 money, COVID money, which is the $2,250,000.
Oh, on the 1st of July.
Right.
Fiscal 21.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll, right. We're talking in 3520, we're talking about fiscal 2020 money. Monday, we'll be talking about 2021 money. And that's when Lynn said we didn't think we could get somebody advertised and hired and spend any money before July 1st, which is probably pretty correct.
It doesn't seem as if a lot of the money is going directly to assisting our communities and helping them reestablish themselves. This is all.
You're so right. You're so right.
So I'll comment a little bit on that. I think Lynn would be probably a little bit more knowledgeable, but there's other things we're going to be spending it on. And please remember that the county has some buckets of money that they have available for communities as well. So I'll let Lynn expand on what other programs are out there that would more directly impact communities.
Yes. So in the total bucket of the $4.2 million, included in that, we envision funding the Community Cares program at least until December 30, and some type of a community grants program to address COVID in collaboration with community organizations, with nonprofit organizations. But we don't expect to be able to get all of that set up and to actually be able to spend any of that money in the next 4 weeks. That's the issue. So when we come back to you in July, then we'll have a full accounting of what we plan to spend or how we plan to spend the remaining $4.2+ million in 2021.
Sheila?
Dewan makes an excellent point. It sounds as if there's already an effort to give nonprofits funding at some level. And my first question is how that's going to impact community grants, the community grants that we are approving as part of the 21 budget. But also, is there a plan to give direct assistance to small businesses, small and minority businesses? I am concerned that decisions are being made and we're not part of it. So what is the plan for the other 2.5 other than the social worker position or the community cares? And I stress the social worker.
So David sent the spreadsheet that we sent to the county with the list of items that we envision spending or have seen as how we will spend the $4.2 million. The county set up a specific fund to provide small and minority businesses with $10,000 grants. And those applications came out yesterday. You may have seen the email, came to your email yesterday with the application process.
Well, I am well aware of the county's funds, the $10,000 grants. And I've been sending that information out for a couple of weeks now. But today is the first day that I heard that the city, and maybe I missed it on the list, that our plan for the city is to give nonprofits community grants. And in my request, I had two. One was for the social worker, and the other was for small minority business grants.
Okay, go ahead, David. Thank you.
Yes. So when we were negotiating with the county on how much of the $101 million would come to the city, they wanted to do those small business grants. So that wasn't included in the $4 million for the city to also do that. So this program is being rolled out jointly between the county and the city, but that resides within that remaining $97 million that the county has, that they're going to do the small business piece of it. So what we're doing the recovery, some of the recovery zone, recovery area types of things to help the business to get started. But we're not going to do direct grants because the county is going to do that from their money. So we don't have to take that from ours. So that was the plan. That was the discussions between the city and the county.
Stephen Rice is on. Okay.
David, I am very glad to hear that it's not part of our $4.2 million that's going to be used for those grants. I guess my question is whether we will have any role in selecting the recipients of those grants. Because I thought I read the information that was sent out that I passed on to businesses, that it's countywide. And I really don't think there's anything wrong with us doing our own also, because we know who our targeted population is. So I just want us to be in front of this and not find out about it after it's all said and done.
David, go ahead. Then Jody was going to say something.
Yes, and I agree. And I think what we need to ensure is that we're part of that. So once the county gets these applications, that we're part of that process, because they absolutely are going to be countywide. Annapolis businesses should get a fair amount of that, clearly. And so we need to be able to participate in whatever sort of panel that they set up to review the applications and decide where the money's going to go.
Okay. Well, you'll keep us.
Go ahead. Jody, did you want to say something before I?
No, I was just, when they were first developing that small business grant plan, I know Stephen Rice was in the group that was setting it up. He's working with the county. So he's got a spot at the table. Now, I don't know how they're considering the applications. That's probably a second stage. And I don't know who's looking at the applications and passing out the funds. But I know we did have a role at that initial step.
I had spoken to Stephen before they came up with the grants about us pursuing grant funding to small minority businesses. And I knew he was part of it, but I just want to make sure. I don't know whether, like you said, whether he's part of the decision making. And I know that the mayor, when I shared this with the mayor, he didn't feel as if we had a process in place that could handle such a grant. And he was very supportive of the county taking it over, which is a good thing if it's not part of the chunk of money they're giving us.
Juan?
I completely agree with you, Sheila. I actually share a concern that is a majority of, that we have to rely on the county for that, in particular African-American small businesses in the city, because although, yes, we do have a ton of small businesses that make up our city, a majority of them are white-owned. And so our handful of Black-owned small businesses in the city that survive usually off of our dollars that have been hit the hardest throughout this COVID-19 pandemic will need assistance, or they won't be here, and we'll be really at square one. So, I mean, if the mayor is concerned that we don't have the capacity to take that on, I would like for us to inquire how we can get involved, more at the county level. I fear that they'll just I'm sure that so much is going on and so many people are asking for those dollars. And I understand that each of them are critical, but I just want to make sure that we're able to get something, or at least a tiny seat at the table.
So let me say two things. I'll speak to that first. I still worry that we're focusing on businesses and not on people. And businesses are trying to get recovered, and that will bring people back to work. But in the meantime, we have a lot of people with no paycheck, a lot of bills, including the need to buy food for themselves and their family. And I feel like they're just being left behind. There's no program that gets the money directly to them when they need it right now. They're in line waiting for the businesses to get back open. And I think there's got to be some way to have a place to get money into the hands of the people that are, I don't know how they're surviving, to be honest. It's not It's just a miracle, I guess, that they're continuing to go. We do have a time constraint, and we do have some general discussion, and I have a couple of questions for the committee. We had voted that we wanted to see the budget amended to go back to reflect the current organization of the city. So far, there's nothing into the Office of Law as in the form of an amendment. Does the committee want to authorize an amendment to ask that the budget be reconstructed? I think it's not a heavy lift since I don't think dollars change at this point. It's just where they're placed. But do we want that coming? Well, I know. I'm sorry, Jody. I don't mean to minimize.
No, I mean, you're right. Total dollars don't change, but it moves all over the place. So
I know it does.
Overall, it's no impact, but the details are kind of hard to do. Yes. I was just I know you're asking the committee for their input. We were gonna draft those and have them in our back pocket just in case somebody asked for them.
Well, I thought we did, but I don't know that we've done it officially. So that's we have to get off by 4:15 sharp. So I wanted to put that to the committee. Do we want to officially put in a request for an amendment to do that?
Yes.
Could you, before I say yes, could you tell me to do what specifically?
To put back basically the Office of Environmental Policy with 3 people in it, Jackie, Racine, and Brian, as opposed to having Brian shown in the money for planning and zoning and Jackie and Racine shown in the money for the city manager.
So translate that to leave that as a standalone department?
Yeah, leave it as it is now. And we have legislation, and it's going to be, I think it's getting public hearing at Monday's meeting. I've seen one person write in and comment on it, and I'm pretty sure the legislation.
I've had several.
Okay, so I think the legislation is going to come to a head. Charter amendment, even when passed, carries it 52 or 54 days before it goes into effect. I think it's 54 days after passage before a charter amendment, which is part of this, before it takes effect. So we would be operating 54 plus days into this next fiscal year with that change not being reflected in the organization. I think people are already mentally working with the new structure, but we did take a position, and the question is straightforward. Do we want to ask for that amendment from the Office of Law when we take up amendments on Monday for the budget? Fred said yes.
And I'll second it.
All right.
Was that a motion from Fred?
Okay.
Yes.
Making a motion. So moved.
All right. And it's seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. There was one other thing.
Mr. Chair, do we want to do anything with the law department that doesn't have a home? I mean,
well, it does have a home. I think what Sheila's referring to is moving the Office of Law to the city manager. I don't think that's a budget issue, and I think it's way late in the game. But if you have an amendment,
well, for I think 6th year in a row, I will make the motion that we move the law department to the city manager's office, like all other departments.
Alderman Payon, your thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking about that. I don't really know how I feel about it.
Well,
when in doubt, I say don't vote in the affirmative. So
we'll give you time to celebrate because Rhonda had her hand up. And we have less than 10 minutes. Rhonda?
I'm just speaking from a personal standpoint, and I'm going to take my city council hat off and put on my lawyer hat.
Or borrow mine.
And I'm not going to get into great detail, and I can talk to Fred offline. I don't think that's a good idea.
And you don't care to elaborate
No, but I'll talk to Fred offline, and he can. He can.
Well, I think we'd all benefit from hearing why from a lawyer.
No, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it on TV. I'd rather say it to Fred, and he can pass it on to you all.
I guess I have moved from the column of not supporting that to supporting it, but I guess I question whether that's a finance committee. I think it's more of a rules committee issue, and we are meeting next week, rules committee. And I think that's a better place to debate it. But we might want to give the Office of Law and the city manager a little heads up about what this thinking is. And it's not a new thought. You're absolutely right.
Surely they know the history.
Yeah, all the way back to Karen Hardwick.
That's right.
But for the budget, are there any other things that the Finance Committee would like to see put in the form of an amendment for the budget deliberations on Monday? I had one, but I just can't think of it. I didn't take my Prevagen, and so my memory is Yes, Takia.
Hi, you guys have a motion on the floor proposed by Alderwoman Finlayson. So
but I don't know that it was seconded.
Well, you didn't call for one, so I don't know officially.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the law department thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not prepared to second it. I'm going to speak with my colleague from Ward 3, and God knows what we can come up with together.
Oh, God, yes.
Well,
that's double trouble.
I'm comfortable with moving that discussion to the Rules Committee.
All right. Thank you.
So I'll withdraw, but I don't need to because I didn't get a second.
Right. Almost got one, but
that's
anything else for?
I can tell she feels so much better about that.
Well, I think it does deserve serious debate. It has been debated. There's a corollary to it, which is that the council have its own council, which is like the county has. And that's another option to think about. That one does have budget consequences and also probably all kinds of other consequences as well. But
now you're talking substantial change from what we have right now, and that certainly deserves, I think, discussion and debate way beyond what we have the time to do here. And it's probably not really our function. I think you're right to talk about it. Certainly not at this time.
So do we have any other business for the Finance Committee for this meeting? If not,
none for me.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Before we go, again, Jody and Katie, thank you. For me, you did exactly what I wanted to see, and it was very helpful. And I know we dumped it on you with a whole bunch of other things going on. So we do really appreciate it. So thank you.
And I'll add that we should have had that with the original, but we were just very rushed getting that out with everything.
Yeah, I know you are, and there's a million things going on for all of us. David, I will be sending you and Carrie and others a redraft of the executive order, which basically puts in the districts in addition to the zones, and uses the districts that were presented by Eileen Fogarty and Dick Franyo at the city council meeting. We are adjourned.
All right.